Welcome to the First Responders Network. I'm Crystal Bailey, your host. We're here on the last day of the IACP conference in Dallas at the Axon booth. We've been talking a lot about the moonshot goal, cutting all gun-related deaths between police and the public by 50% in 10 years. I'm excited to be sitting down with the head of training at Axon, Andy Wrenn. Andy, tell me a little bit about how you got into where you are now, your background in law enforcement and public safety.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. Thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate being here. First thing I'd like to say is we're all thinking about the police officers we lost in the month of October specifically. It's been a real tough time for our customers, so thoughts and prayers to their communities and families in those departments. I started in public safety when I was 17 years old, followed my big brother to the fire department, and really built some phenomenal relationships with the sheriff's deputies in Guilford County, North Carolina, that mentored me into policing at age 23, and started at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, where I really worked for about 14 and a half years before coming to Axon, and just really love our profession and what we do in our communities, and so happy to be here at Axon to support the mission to support our customers and their service to their communities.
And I know training was a big part of your career even before you joined Axon. So tell me a little bit about why training is a direct correlation to meeting this moonshot goal.
Yeah, I pretty early on as a kid, I was really interested in martial arts, and so I started training at a younger age. And then when I got into policing, we had a pretty good defensive tactics program at CMPD, and I was asked to come on as an adjunct instructor. Even still in patrol, I would be asked to come in and support in-service and state-mandated training for our CMPD officers. And in that work, I just fell in love with what we were able to do for our officers at CMPD at the Police Academy. So applied for an instructor position at the Police Academy, spent a couple years there, and in that role took over the TASER program, which like most of us who get hit with a TASER the first time, just life-changing, right? Like really incredible technology and how we can use that to leverage really taking someone safely in custody in policing. And so spent a couple of years at the Academy running the TASER program, and that's how I met Rick Smith back in 2004 and got to know the TASER family pretty early on.
And I imagine the TASER innovation between the time you were training in Charlotte and now has changed dramatically.
Yeah,
absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I used a TASER 4 times in the field to defend myself or other officers, or take ones. We've had a couple of mental health calls where specifically in my use of the TASER, where we had to take someone into custody safely who were combative but mentally ill, and we wanted to get them the help that they needed. And so I had experience using really the single shot platform we had, which is the X26E at CMPD, and then we went to X2s, and seeing that innovation, just that second trigger pull, an additional chance to actually take someone into custody safely, it's a huge advancement, right? And from X2 to TASER 7, and it's really incredible the innovations that we've been able to accomplish here at the company. And with every innovation of a TASER device, we're looking to solve a specific problem. With TASER 7, we were looking to specifically solve why we miss, why we have clothing barriers that we can't get through, and why probe spread's really been a problem for us on achieving the incapacitation we want on the TASER device.
And I imagine the same is also true for as we move into the VR world.
Yeah.
And technology is changing so much and so quickly. Being able to put law enforcement officers in these scenarios ahead of time. Can you talk a little bit about that and training officers in that area as well?
Yeah, absolutely. VR is an incredible technology. The science of the way we learn in VR is more of like how we recall childhood memories, less about how we actually learn in person.
Interesting.
So it's super sticky, right?
Okay.
Super effective. VR is a disruptive way to think about training. So not only can we learn and learn at repetition, we can actually accelerate our learning. So here's an example. A lot of agencies conduct TASER training like once a year or even twice a year. So imagine now you have a training platform where instead of shooting a couple of cartridges or 10 cartridges a year even in some of our customers' programs, you can shoot thousands of them in VR and learn really just adaptive skills in ways to apply the device to achieve incapacitation, or in a lot of cases even get compliance without ever pulling a trigger. That's a really important one. A lot of agencies count the number of times they pull a trigger on a taser, but they don't count the times that they actually get compliance by just talking to someone, communicating effectively, working through de-escalation techniques with the taser without ever pulling the trigger. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, we've been hearing, from chiefs all over the country, and they've been sitting down with me and sharing their enthusiasm for the moonshot goal. And, I shared with you right before we started our interview that, the reality is each person is somebody's brother, sister, mother, they go home to somebody, whether you're a law enforcement officer or a member of the public. And so can we talk a little bit about how this training, both TASER and VR, have aided law enforcement officers and the public in reminding everyone about that human element, that everybody wants to go home?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about effective communication. I think what, candidly, we haven't done really well in the profession is humanize our communication from the police to the community. The reality is we are brothers and sisters and wives and husbands and moms and dads, and you get it, right? And at the end of the day, police officers join the police department to serve. And so we need to really remember that.
Yeah.
So stop someone for speeding. We should try to be less robotic, and we should try to talk to them. Hey, are you okay? Do you have a medical emergency? Just effective communication and talking to people like a human being instead of like a robot. Man, that stuff goes a long way, and those are things that we can do in VR at repetition, especially for our younger officers.
Yeah.
The thing about training is we really have this phenomenal obligation and mission to train, and the most important person at the end of that journey is the police officer who delivers the service to their community. And here at Axon, we train master instructors and we train instructors, and we do all of that so the agencies then can prepare their people to go out and serve with their communities. Yeah. So effective communication is something that is always top of mind, something we can definitely improve on.
And let's talk about the future.
Yeah.
This moonshot goal we're looking 10 years ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are all these different ways that training will be changed and continues to change in the next 10 years. But where do you see us in 10 years? Where do you see us when the moonshot goal, we're faced with it? How does that look for you?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing we need to do is like what's happening, what's current state. So we know a lot of TASER programs specifically out there. Unfortunately, we have some agencies that are still delivering training with a static target and a TASER device and saying, hey, we've gone through TASER training, but the reality is we haven't taken the officer through learning in a use of force environment, right? So when the stress level is up, when we incorporate threat and distance management, when we incorporate critical decision making, that is how we operate in a use of force. So if we're not training in an environment in the environment in which we operate in our community, it's actually harmful to the officer. Like, we really got to step that up. My team, Axon Training, the company, we are behind our officers, we're behind our customers. We really want to support agencies and help them evolve their training programs. And I talk about TASER, and we really want to talk about all tools on the belt with law enforcement, because all tools matter. The TASER, it still continues to be the most used force option in law enforcement today. So we certainly feel like we have an obligation. For the future, it's taking that kind of thought, right? How do we continue to improve and evolve our training? And then what technology can assist us either in the acceleration of that training or the modality of learning? Like we talked about VR and how incredible that science is to learning. And so we think about those platforms for sure.
And you mentioned that there are some agencies that still are using, like you mentioned, the static training methods. Can you talk a little bit about maybe why there might be that hesitancy or resistance to change to move into 21st century, maybe even 22nd century, I guess, looking ahead?
Yeah, I think the thing to call out is a lot of agencies are under-resourced right now. And so you have to be real careful about saying, hey, you're not training enough. Some agencies just candidly don't have the resources and funding they need to train to the level that they want to train. So our communities have to get behind our police agencies to reinforce and support them and deliver those resources. And, candidly, like if we look at how funding is delivered, how those requirements are essentially set, there's some work to do on the legislative side. And I'll give you an example. In North Carolina, to be a basic level certification barber, it's over 1,500 hours that the state requires you to go through training. Whereas policing, to be a basic level certified police officer, it's just over 600 hours. So our communities who elect officials to write and incorporate legislation, which drives all of this, we've got to all take some responsibility and set a new standard for what we're giving agencies and resourcing officers to do when it comes to training.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point you make, and the reality is that more training. I think I spoke with somebody yesterday who told me that in Finland, the training hours are significantly, I think they train for several years, and there's a direct correlation to their negative interactions being very low with the public. And that's amazing to think about, what ways we could look at that for, how do we do that here? Or with I know it's a little bit of politics, but.
It is. It's a lot of politics, as a matter of fact. But I just got back from Germany, and those police officers go through 3 years. Right? And we're sending young men and women out there with 6 months of training.
Right.
And by the way, in 6 months, less than 10% of that is use of force.
Yes.
So that should just tell you, hey, we're probably not resourcing officers and equipping them well enough to go out into the world and do these incredible things that we're asking them to do, right?
Yeah.
So we're not going to change that overnight, but what we can do is we can reinforce support and resources for our agencies, and VR, just coming back to that technology, that is an incredible way to accelerate that learning. It's pretty impactful.
And I know that we're kind of moving forward with the TASER. We're moving forward in all these training methods. What about TASERCon? I know you really wanted to bring that up. What can we look forward to at TASERCon?
Yeah, so you had mentioned Moonshot earlier, right? And so if we can make the best technology in the world, and at Axon, I think we do. I think we make phenomenal devices to help men and women of law enforcement do their job and do it well, but we can't forget about the humans. We have to invest in the officers in public safety, like that's so important, right? So training continues to be just at the forefront of how we get to Moonshot as a company, how we actually do that. TASERCon is another extension of Moonshot, right?
Okay.
So TASERCon, we're so excited about this. It's the first year ever. We're in Las Vegas. We're taking on officer wellness, vitality. We want to help agencies solve some problems around burnout, depression, and those kinds of things. All of that negatively impacts the decisions in which to use force. We know that. And today, although we've lost a ton of officers in the last couple of weeks to gunfire, which is horribly tragic, it's actually not the thing that's killing officers most. The thing that is killing officers most today are heart attacks and suicide. Those are things we can directly impact as a profession here at Axon, and that we're super passionate about that. I am obsessed with fixing this, and we wanted to take a stab at just delivering a really good conference that is a platform for a deliberate conversation about how we do that, and that's what TASERCon is. So if you've ever been to Accelerate, it's very tech forward, right?
Yes.
Just really, really fun, tech forward, a lot of energy. TASERCon's kind of the opposite. We're very human forward. So we're going to have really incredible sessions and speakers talking about wellness, vitality, leadership, decision making. It's going to be
the whole human.
The whole human.
Right.
It's a conference about the whole officer. That's correct. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So pumped about it.
Yeah, I can feel the sincerity about how important it is for you to see whole people in uniform.
There's also some, TASERCon, we want to take on some really challenging things, right? But it's going to be fun. Lots of energy. And we're going to be doing stuff at TASERCon.
Don't let that dissuade you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. But we're going to be doing stuff at TASERCon that we can't tell you about yet, but you don't want to miss. Some big stuff coming up.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to, as you talk about training, as you talk about the whole officer, as you talk about ways that we can improve policing, and it's really wonderful to see that everybody out here seems to be really enthusiastic about meeting this goal, as crazy as it may seem to take on something so big. I think most people I've heard from are really respecting Axon for staking the claim and saying we're going to start this. And this is a communal goal. I know 100%. You mentioned earlier, it takes a little bit of back and forth with the community. And I think it's a matter of civilians, vendors, tech companies, and law enforcement communities to to wrap their arms around the idea of let's reduce gun violence between the two.
Absolutely. It's been a tough couple of years for law enforcement. We know recruiting is down 30-40% in some areas of the country. Like, that is super scary, folks.
Yeah.
Like that, we have got to figure out a way to recruit folks into this profession. It's one of the most beautiful professions there is. People just wanting to serve their communities and solve problems, and that's the core of the law enforcement officer. Like, people are in this for the right thing. We just got to figure out how to support them. Even President Biden said a couple months ago, like, hey, we don't need to take resources away from law enforcement. We need to give them more resources.
The
and
right
training.
resources.
That's right. Training is really key to that.
Well, thank you so much for sitting with me and sharing your thoughts on this. It's really important, and I'm looking forward to seeing the future of the Moonshot.
Thanks, Crystal. Really appreciate it. And TaserCon is going to be great. We're excited to see everyone there.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
And thank you so much for joining us on FRN Live from IACP. We have wrapped, and this is the final day, but continue to watch FRN for more content and good stories about the human side of the public safety world. Thanks for joining us.